In the cold dawn of 1945, deep beneath the pine forests of Rugen Island, a handful of scientists gathered in an underground laboratory carved into the white chalk cliffs. The air was thick with the scent of oil and metal, and the dim glow of carbide lamps cast long shadows across rows of polished mirrors and racks of precision instruments. At the center of the cavern stood a massive parabolic reflector, its surface almost 30 feet in diameter, assembled from 30 separate segments of polished aluminum. Nearby, a control console bristled with dials, gauges, and a single red button labeled Sonnenkanon, sun gun. Professor Hermann Oberth, gaunt and intense, hovered over the console. His thin fingers traced the curves of design schematics spread across a nearby table. He had devoted his life to rocket science and space travel. But this project, codenamed Project Himmelskanon, combined those dreams with a darker purpose. The Reich's High Command believed that by placing a massive mirror in low Earth orbit, they could focus the sun's rays like a magnifying glass and incinerate enemy cities. London, Moscow, New York. The theoretical calculations were sound. At perigee, the 200-foot mirror could concentrate energy equivalent to several hundred megawatts on a target below. Oberth had arrived at Rugen 2 years earlier, recruited by SS Obergruppenführer Hans Kammler, the architect of secret weapons and underground bunkers. Kammler promised Oberth unlimited resources, steel, fuel, labor, in exchange for his expertise. V-2 rockets had already proven the power of guided missiles. The sun gun would eclipse them. Yet even as Oberth oversaw the assembly of the ground-based test reflector, he wrestled with the moral implications. One morning he wrote in his journal, "A weapon that harnesses the sun's fury is as close to playing God as any mortal can muster. How will history remember us if we unleash such power?" By early March the ground tests were ready. A convoy of armored trucks brought in a captured British steam generator to power the cryogenic pumps that cooled the tracking mechanism. Under the watchful eyes of Waffen-SS guards, technicians aligned the mirror segments with painstaking precision, using lasers borrowed from Heinkel aircraft factories. At first light on March 10th, Oberth and Kammler activated the auxiliary lasers to calibrate the system. Tiny beams of red light danced across the parabolic surface before converging on a steel plate positioned a half-mile away. Smoke curled upward from the heated plate, and within seconds, the metal glowed cherry red. Wilhelm, a young engineer with trembling hands, noted stoically, "At this rate, we could burn through 2 inches of armor plating in under a minute." Hitler in his mountain retreat received the news with a manic grin. He imagined harnessing the sun's power to level Stalingrad's ruins, to force Britain's surrender without risking more U-boat crews. He spoke of Thor's hammer in the sky and ordered Oberth to expedite orbital testing. But launching a 200-foot mirror into orbit required a rocket far larger than any the V-2 program had produced. The engineers proposed assembling the mirror segments in Earth orbit using a fleet of multiple smaller rockets and space tugs. Yet the war's dwindling resources and Allied bombings made such ambitions seem ever more remote. Undeterred, Kammler launched a clandestine operation to build a prototype orbital module at the Peenemünde West facility. Under the cover of night and forced laborers hidden in sealed train cars, they forged a skeletal frame for a singular 60-foot reflector, enough to test the concept in miniature. They planned to piggyback the payload atop a modified V-4 rocket, a theoretical successor to the A9-A10 long-range design. In late May, with the Red Army advancing and American bombers penetrating deeper into Germany, the prototype was rushed to the launch pad. On June 2nd, as dawn broke in smoky skies over Peenemünde, the launch ignited. The V-4's engines thundered, sending molten trails across the concrete. Villagers miles away reported a distant roar like 1,000 storms breaking free. Tracking radars in occupied Denmark picked up the rocket as it arced toward the Baltic. For a tense half hour, Oberth and his team waited in the command bunker, monitoring telemetry. Then, the signal flickered. Stage separation successful. Second stage ignition nominal. Orbital insertion on track. The small mirror module deployed flawlessly, spinning slowly to stabilize its orientation. Ground-based telescopes glimpsed the glint of sunlight on polished metal hundreds of miles overhead. Back in Berlin, Hitler was ecstatic. A demonstration of the sun gun's power would force the Allies to sue for peace. Broadcasts were prepared, trumpeting the dawn of a new Wunderwaffe. Yet on the night of June 5th, disaster struck. Allied electronic countermeasures, part of Operation Counterglow, jammed the remote activation frequencies. Satellites would come later. For now, Oberth's prototype required a coded radio signal on 719 kHz to initiate the high-power focusing lasers. When the command arrived, nothing happened. Desperate, Oberth switched to a backup frequency salvaged from an Italian radar set, but again, no reply. The mirror floated inert in orbit, its power cells draining. Within days, solar heating degraded its cooling circuits. The polished surface warped, rendering the reflector useless. The first sun gun was a failure. To Nazi propagandists, it was a minor setback spun as Allied sabotage. In truth, it revealed the fatal flaw of the entire concept. Any orbiting mirror powerful enough to scorch a city would face crippling technical challenges, launch costs, precise alignment, vulnerability to jamming or destruction. Allies had already drafted plans to shoot down the prototype with Spitfire-mounted rockets if it activated. The Germans' resource scarcity meant they could build only one prototype, and losing it meant losing the sun gun forever. By July, as Allied forces landed on the continent and Soviet troops closed in from the east, the Nazi High Command abandoned Project Himmelskanon. Oberth was reassigned to studying how V-2 technology might salvage a Jaeger rocket to moonshot, dreams that would also fade with Germany's surrender. Kammler disappeared into the chaos, rumored to have taken his own life or been executed for war crimes. The underground labs on Rügen were sealed, and the massive ground reflector left to rust in its secret chamber. After the war, Allied investigators scoured Nazi scientific records and unearthed tantalizing fragments of the sun gun plans. Oberth, captured by American forces and later granted immunity, testified at length about the project's potential and pitfalls. He admitted that while the physics were sound, the sun's energy at orbital intensity was sufficient to cause catastrophic heat, the engineering and logistical challenges rendered it impractical. In 1946, he published a sanitized memoir reflecting on the ethical weight of his involvement. He wrote, "When humankind's ambition reaches into the heavens, it carries the burden of responsibility. A weapon that weaponizes the sun itself is a terror beyond measure." In the decades that followed, as satellites circled the globe and solar energy became a beacon of clean power, the legacy of the sun gun took on new resonance. In the 1970s, during oil crises, visionaries proposed space-based solar power stations. Huge flat panels capturing sunlight and beaming energy back to Earth via microwaves. Those civilian dreams traced their lineage to Oberth's sketches, repurposing the focus from destruction to illumination. Yet the cautionary tale remained. Concentrating starlight can warm a receiver or flash melt a battlefield. Intent defines the outcome. Today, artifacts from Project Himmelskanon are scattered among archives. A single segment of the prototype mirror, its aluminum still gleaming beneath museum glass. Oberth's annotated blueprints, their pages yellowed but legible. Decrypted radio logs showing the fatal jam frequencies. Historians debate whether the project even reached the threshold of true feasibility, or whether it was a fantastical fever dream spawned by the Third Reich's desperation. Popular culture immortalized the concept in science fiction and video games. often as a diabolical superweapon orbiting distant planets. Yet the reality was more human, more tragic. A group of brilliant minds chasing a sunlit fantasy, their work twisted by ideology into a machine of terror. In the end, the sun's power remained tethered to life, not death. Solar farms now stretch across deserts, providing clean electricity to millions. Space agencies study sun-synchronous orbits to cool spacecraft with radiative panels and shield astronauts from solar flares. The notion of a sun-focusing cannon is relegated to history's footnotes, a cautionary footpath where ambition met hubris. But on clear nights, if you peer through a telescope at the abandoned launch site on Rügen's cliffs, you might catch a faint reflection, an echo of Oberth's grand mirror, still waiting in the darkness for a signal that will never come. Thanks for watching. On Lost Innovations, we uncover the inventions and ideas that could have changed history, but didn't. Subscribe to explore more forgotten breakthroughs and untold stories from the past. Like this video and leave a comment. How would our world look today if these inventions had been realized?